success is doing common things uncommonly well. So I took what I figured out worked, and I really done it uncommonly well. I pushed it into a high level, into a art. Mastery of skills takes a lifetime. These people that's 20 or 30 years old out there on the internet trying to tell people how to hunt and bash old hunters like me, they hadn't even got to the level yet where they can ask good, intelligent questions.
Thank you for all the support with Whitetail Cribs back, and we're going to do something we've never done with Bobby Worthington. We have the full-length episode of the Whitetail Cribs. We chop it down usually into 20 to 30 minutes, but this is over an hour of whitetail wisdom with Bobby Worthington on the Whitetail Podcast, Whitetail Cribs edition, brought to you by Moultrie. I hope you guys enjoy it. Here we go.
Once you get rid of all the garbage you hear on the internet and all the garbage of these professional hunters, so-called, and once you understand this type of hunting is different than sitting over a pile of corn or hunting a managed piece of property. Once you understand big woods hunting is different, and once I explain big wood hunting, yeah, that's pretty simple. But I can take you to woods and say, find me a tree to hunt out of, and it will take a lifetime to learn that. Hey, Jake. How you doing?
Bobby, thanks for having us.
Good to meet you. Yeah, come on in. I'm glad I dressed up. I didn't know you was bringing the camera. So is this a podcast, or you call it the crib?
Yep, Whitetail Cribs.
I heard of a crib in Chicago. I never heard of one around here, so we're going to have one around here. Come on in. When I worked at the prison, we had a shooting range we called the Greenfield that was, well, in the prison too, inside public hunting. State forest. I found a shed there where we shot guns at. I didn't actually find it. A couple of my friends did, and they ended up giving it to him when I killed the deer. After I found the shed, I'd heard rumors about a big old white deer in there. Of course, he got some whistlers here, but he's got the same stickers on the front and back as both his horns. I'd heard rumors for a few years about a real big deer in there, and I didn't know if it was true because it was public hunting, but after they found the shed, I did. And I got in there and got lucky enough to kill him the next year. I learned from him when not to push a big deer. I learned not to hunt him too quick. Back then, we was having trail cameras. You know, I had the first ones out, the old trail. I think it's called Trail Master. And you put the camera over here and the camera over here, and it'd shoot a beam, and something would break the beam, take a picture. And I'd already got to figuring out that these big deer was nocturnal. If they ain't nocturnal in a heavily hunted area, they're dead by the time they're 2.5 or 3.5. So what's left is nocturnal. I got to learning that if I get in there and push these deer too much and walk around and get in and out of the stand, he's going to come through at night and know I was there, because I would sit there to dinner and the doe would come through and know I'd been there after just a day or two, and I'd see less does. So I got to figuring out not to push them too early, and I just started hunting him, I think, the 25th. And I killed him the 29th of October. That's one of the earliest deer I've ever killed. I killed one the 25th. And I've learned that these big woods deer that make it to maturity are nocturnal. I also learned that the one thing that will get them out of that nocturnal mode is the rut, the desire to procreate, and that makes them vulnerable. But the calendar has to be right. And I've learned over the years that October 25th is that time. Give or take. When whitetail deer, you never say never or always, but as a general rule. Now, if it turns really unseasonably cold, the 23rd or 24th, I might start hunting then. But generally, it's the 25th. And when I started this back before there was trail cameras, that was always the date I used. Nowadays, if I get a picture of one, say it turns cold, and I get a picture of one of these nocturnal deer on the 23rd or 4th, I'll, of course, start hunting them then. And then I would only do it if it was unseasonably cold. So I learned from this deer that it helped me confirm that late October, 25th to the 29th, you can kill a big deer that is nocturnal. And when I say nocturnal, I'm talking about nocturnal outside the rut. And then the rut pulls them in. So, and you can talk about why they're nocturnal. I've always believed that some were just born with that trait, because I get pictures of 1.5 and 2.5 year olds at night that I don't see in the daytime a lot. So I've come to believe that. But I also know that human presence in daylight also pushes them into that mode. Deer are scared to death. That's born in the wild. They are scared to death. That's born in the wild where there's generations of hunters, like in Tennessee and other places, public hunt. They're scared to death of humans. There's a friend of mine here on this farm, the owner of a big piece of property back here I manage. one year he watched a fawn. He noticed a doe hunched up in an odd way, and he got to look at her, and she was having a fawn. And that fawn was born and hit the ground, and she looked on her some, and in a few minutes she eased off over here, and that fawn was standing there, and the wind switched to where that fawn could smell him. The doe didn't yet. She was off to the side a little more, and that fawn hit the ground just like that, spread out on all fours, and did not move an inch. Didn't even blink an eye. Later, he walked up to it and had to walk nearly on it before he could even see it, and it was on wasn't much vegetation. But that fawn, by instinct, over several years of generations being hunted, that fawn, by instinct, was scared to death of a human. Is it because they're scared of humans and they encounter more and more in the daylight in a heavily hunted area that they're nocturnal, or is some of them born to that trait? I think maybe some of both. I'm not smart enough to know. I do know that the more they encounter humans, the more they're going to switch to sometime they don't encounter them. And I do know that some deer, I think, are born that way because I've studied them all my life. You don't learn this stuff on the internet, and you don't learn this stuff in a book. Most books you get. You learn it from living 60 years in the woods. And I'd get photographs of several deer that all through the years that grow up and die and never see them in daylight or get a daylight picture, even though there's just a year and a half and 2.5. So I think it's both ways.
How many encounters do you hunt? You mentioned not pushing deer. So 25th, the magic date. You shot him on the 29th. Mm-hmm. How many times did you hunt? Did you have him 4 times on those 4 evenings?
This deer here?
Yeah.
Oh, I hunted him a morning or two. I think I killed him it was the first time I'd hunted. And when I say time, I mean the first few days of the first week, first time I tried to get him. It ain't like I tried to get him late October, then start again middle of October. It was like maybe my third trip. And you can read that story, and sometimes I forget all the details, but you can read it in my book and research it online or whatever. I call him the Tennessee Monarch, I think. That's the story, the title of the story. So I learned from that one that you can kill him on a pattern. He was on a pattern. Bow hunting trophy deer is a lot simpler and also a lot more difficult than most people understand. It's simple in that I can tell you a few facts about them from the pre-rut, from the time they shed their velvet and break up with their bachelor droops. The time photo period pulls them into that mode is pre-rut. Pre means before. Up until about November 3rd, there's a pattern to their movement. They're in their core area. Slowly, as it gets toward the end of November, they're branching out more and more, checking this doe group, this family group of does, and this family group, and leaving their sign and their scrapes and letting their presence be known. They branch out more, but it's at night. So they're on a pattern. They're in their core area mostly, and then they slowly branch out more. But even as they branch out more, they're on somewhat of a pattern. It may be a few days till they go back to this group, but they're on a pattern. And they're on that pattern from about the time they shed the velvet to about the 3rd of November. And they can be killed on that pattern. But, see, I'm going to redefine the stages of the rut and add more detail. I need to do that in my new book. But from about the 25th to the 3rd, from anywhere north of the 35th parallel line, from say here in southeastern Tennessee up to the Canadian border, it's going to be the same time frame. So from about November 25th to the 3rd, that rut pulls these nocturnal deer into daylight movement. They're still on a pattern then. So that is one of the easiest times to kill them. But the issue is the temperature. If it's unseasonably warm, they're going to move at night. If it's unseasonably cold during that time, so the temperature, the thermostat, and the calendar will pull them into daylight during that short window. And you'll have so many people say, I killed him on a straight line. You'll have so many people say, I hunted a straight line or I hunted a rub line, and you can't kill a deer like that. Well, they may be doing it before that they're in their daylight movement. And then by the time they get to the daylight movement, they've disturbed them so much they're no longer would dare go in that area. Or they may do it all through November when they're no longer on the pattern. So I can explain this deer hunting pretty simple. They're off the pattern starting about November 3rd. Till the 7th or 8th, they're going hard looking for that first doe. That is the most vulnerable time for them if it's unseasonably cold. you've got 12 hours of good hunting. You hunt all day long. It's just as good at dinner as it is earlier morning. And then after about the 8th or 9th, they're locked down to a big stage. And within an hour after that doe's out of heat, within an hour, they can find another one. So they're hard locked down till about the 19th. And about the 19th, they will start breaking free again and getting on their feet again. Now, used to, I'd plan all of my vacations for the last week of October, first week of November, back in the day, back in the 70s and early 80s. But the temperature has changed that. I've done a pretty good study here recently, and now I've decided, and I've told my son, just change the date you're taking vacation, because the 19th through Thanksgiving, because of the cold temperatures, I think you got a better chance of success than you do that prime time. And when I say prime time, the 3rd through the 7th for me is it. That's when you see them running across open fields, across roads, across interstates, see them dead on the interstates, but there's no pattern to the movement. But they're moving, and they're moving a lot. That gets a lot of them killed. Even people that don't have a hunt can kill them then, because any tree in the woods at that time can produce a giant. There's no pattern to the movement. So you got to understand there's a time when there's a pattern. All of that time when there's a pattern, only a short period of it's in daylight. Then they leave that pattern, and then you have to change your tactics. You can't keep hunting a pattern when they're no longer on a pattern. So how do you capitalize on a mature buck you see running across the open field or across the interstate where you've never seen them before? Well, that's a different tactics. You get somewhere where there's a physical barrier that's going to force them to be in place. So I can explain it. It's simple. Once you get rid of all the garbage you hear on the internet and all the garbage of these professional hunters, so-called, and once you understand this type of hunting is different than sitting over a pile of corn or hunting a managed piece of property, once you understand big woods hunting is different, and once I explain big wood hunting, yeah, that's pretty simple. But I can take you to woods and say, find me a tree to hunt out of, and it will take a lifetime to learn that. It's simple, but it's not easy. And it takes a lifetime of setting. It's not, you can't go about it half-hearted. You can't divide we talked about that earlier. You cannot divide your mental energy into 2 or 3 equal things, because you'll lose your mental momentum toward this. So that taught me several things and confirmed more than anything things I'd kind of figured out. There's so much clutter now, so much clutter. And I really think a lot of it's because of podcasts. Some of the most confused people I run into and I talk to are podcast hosts. They have no idea. And people that watch all the different podcasts and try to take it all in. What happens is people try to take all this in, and they'll try to pick what sounds most reasonable from this one and most reasonable from this one, and they'll try to develop their own style. Well, that's how all this garbage got started anyway. That don't work. It don't work because the premise is wrong. And the premise is wrong because you're either trying to take what somebody else done on a managed piece of property and apply it to big woods, deer that's pressure. And it don't have to be big woods. If you've got 200 acres here, and you've got a 300-acre farm here, and a 500-acre farm here, and a 200 and 150 and a 60-acre farm here, all of you guys are hunting the same deer. That's big woods hunting. That is not a managed area where them deer are protected. So any 3-year-old or 2.5-year-old that is not nocturnal, that moves around in daylight outside the rut's dead before he gets material. So you have to apply this to more situations than that. And I think a big part of the problem is, while all the confusion and contradictions, people will show up on the internet with a giant buck 2 or 3 years in a row, and you guys will get on there and say, hey, why don't you come on our podcast? You're killing some great deer. Our audience would like to hear that. And that guy is sitting over a pile of corn, and it may be legal, it may not. And then he's got to get on the internet and research and figure out something to say. And he gets on there and he uses human logic, which has nothing to do with it. Experience. 60 years in the woods has taught me what I have. So he gets on there and puts his 2 cents worth in. And then another guy maybe killed 2 or 3 giants on a managed piece of property, gets there and says that. And the guy that's killed it over corn ain't going to say he killed it over corn. He's got to come up with something. I respect the guys that do say, I really don't know much about this. I know how to bait, and I'll tell you how to do it. That's good. And so many of these deer are killed, poached, Just to be honest with you, here in Bledsoe County, Tennessee, we can go down and take you to home after home. And they have a pretty, not like this. Efficient hunting, learning the correct way, the real way, to learning woodsmanship skills is the best way to go about it to kill big deer. These guys that's got these deer on the walls from spotlighting all night, none of them in this county can compare to mine, you know. So there's a lot of confusion, and there's a lot of reasons for it. I ain't got that clutter. I don't get on the internet and see how people's killing their deer that's killed big. Don't want to hear what they got to say. Me and the old timers that's learned it through living in the woods, we ain't got no confusion about it. So it's simple when you really understand it, but it's not easy. Most people just don't have the grit to do it, to stick with it. The learning process and also the being able to settle as long as it takes, because that is one of the important elements is time in the woods.
The Whitetail Podcast is brought to you by Moultrie. One of the first cameras I ever bought was a Moultrie, and they've come a long way. Whether after your first deer ever or this is your 20th year of hunting, Moultrie has you covered. Their cellular trail cameras have no SD card, very easy to use and set up right out of the box. I love to pair the Power Mag with a Pro Series camera. The Moultrie cameras are affordable, effective, and reliable with US-based customer service, 2-year warranty, and just a great camera. So the next time you're in the store and you're trying to decide what camera to buy, I encourage you to try Moultrie if you want to support the podcast.
This deer here, I killed him November 2nd on a rub line. Rubs was that big. Me and my son, Bobby Ray, we was going to Illinois to scout. I said, let's go up there in July. And he's having some issues. And I said, I'm going to pull you out of school. And let's just go up in July in the public hunting in Illinois. It was Siloam Springs State Park. And I'd called up there, and they said they thought there's a big deer or two. And there was an opening in an area that hadn't been hunted before. I always look for these because it's just like a managed piece of property where you control 100% the hunting pressure. Some of the bucks that has the disposition or the trait, whether it's because they've encountered fewer humans and it hadn't moved them to be nocturnal, or they have that trait to be born with, it don't matter, same thing. They have a trait to move around in daylight outside the rut, and they've reached the older age. Of course, it wouldn't have mattered for this one because I killed him the 2nd of November. So he was still on that pattern, and the calendar had pulled him in the daylight from the 25th to around the 25th to the 3rd. And he was still on that pattern. So I killed him on a huge rub line. But we went up our scouting and got in there and found some rubs. I was standing there looking around for rubs, and I was looking on small stuff and I wasn't seeing nothing. Ray said, look at all these huge rubs. My boy, he's like 11, I think. And I thought, well, I don't see any rubs. He pointed to one tree, and I got to look, and all the trees was rubbed. I mean, it was just amazing. So I dissected the trail system. Wasn't a funnel there. But I dissected the trail systems and got them all together the best I could possibly do that was on all of these rubs. The trails all had rubs on them, and I got them all together. I think the 2nd or 3rd day I hunted, I killed him. Shot him with an old Sweeky broadhead and an old Hoyt. I think it was an old Hoyt Oasis bow. So that was a good story. This one here was a real good, though. I mean, for a Tennessee deer, that's a great deer, a lot of mass. I called him Fate. I don't remember if it's Clay or AJ. Said, Dad, you're going to kill him. It's Fate. So I named him Fate. I shot him the year before on his rub line. There's 2 times I hunt big deer. Once is on the rub line when they're on the pattern, and the next is when all through from November 3rd, rest of the month. And then I go to a funnel. And boy, I've seen it catch on now. I've preached it for a while. I got in all the books, and I'm seeing on the internet now where people saying, drawing out a little sketch, the trees here, trails here, and here's the funnel. Here's the funnel. Catching on pretty good, but I ain't the one that invented it. You know, there's nothing new under the sun. To be successful, you take something common and you do it uncommonly well. So I've spent years perfecting this. And there's so much, like I said, it's simple, but it ain't easy. When I go to a funnel, if I ask you 1 tree or 2, is this funnel good enough to blind hunt, or are you going to have evidence? What trees? How will wind affect them? How will the thermals affect them? There's thousands of questions. There's probably 20 questions I ask people when I get to a funnel. So it takes years to learn that. Years. I'm pretty amazed when I put on these woodsmanship classes. I've had people to read my book and just be, oh man, killed the best deer of my life. I understand funnels now. You get in the woods and the first funnel or 2, I ask them a few questions. It's just different when you see it. I mean, they learn more than they would have, but it's just really different. this last class had a guy from Alabama. I really like him. He said, well, I don't know. He come to the class. He said, I said, hey, you hunt? He said, well, I use a climber, and I'll go to Illinois every year, but I'll find a tree I can climb a good straight one that's the right size. He said, I like it. And I want to be where I can see good. And I said, you bow hunting? Yeah. I said, okay, that's good. And then I done my little talk there in class, and I mentioned that if myself and Gene and Barry Wenzel and the late Roger Rother, who was a hunting partner of mine, went to the woods, and we went to a managed area and scouted for 2 or 3 days. I believe we'd pick 2, if not 3 of the same trees. At the end of the class, he told me, we was talking about everything, and he said, Bobby, when you said that, I thought, this guy is absolutely nuts. How in the world can you go with thousands of trees, 3 people, and pick the same tree? He said, I thought that was the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. I thought I'd wasted my money. And at the end of the class, he said, I know exactly now what you're talking about. And he said, I'd like to throw myself in that number, maybe on some of them. But yeah, it's pretty amazing. But that deer there, my boys was, even though they was too little to hunt back then, they was really involved in the story and excited about me killing it, and killed him on a pattern, seen his pattern. The rest of the big ones I've killed is pretty well in a funnel. But I learned how to hunt 2 ways. When they're on a pattern, you got to hunt their sign. You got to try to get 2 or 3 of the trails together, and never set up and cover one travel corridor or one trail when you can cover 2. Never cover 2 when you pick a different tree and cover 3. There was a guy at the class showing me a huge deer he'd killed an omnis felon. He said, I named that deer Bobby. And I said, why? And he said, I listened to your podcast and got to reading your books. And he said, I went to one of my stands, and he said, I scouted further. I went on down, and I picked up another trail. He said, I went down a little further, and I hadn't lost any yet. And I picked up one more. I said, I sat here and have additional deer come by me. And he said, the last place I picked up, I killed that deer on. I never would even knew he was there if I hadn't. So he killed 2 giants that year, this past year, using funnels. But that deer is special to me. I shot him the year before through the tenderloin. He dropped down. I didn't get him, and I thought I never would get him, but my boys kept telling me I would, and he blew up into a really massive, non-typical. That's a great Tennessee deer. So that was a good story. This guy right here now, he was the real deal, Fred Bear. That's his Archer's Bible, and I've got his old original field notes too. Like I said, that book sold for $2.50. I was looking at it, and it's amazing I was able to strap up enough to get that. People want to know where I got started with the idea of hunting funnels and terrain features. I've got his old catalogs from his Archery magazines. This was when I was at college. That's 1985, and in a lot of these old Fred Bear Tells How to Enjoy Archery, this is where they introduce their new products and how their old products. It's where you do your mail order, and I just wore these books out. But you can see the whitetail deer here by Fred Bear. Sometimes these books will have about turkey hunting and about big game sheep. And this one here in 1975 had the one Fred Bear Tells How to Hunt what he considers to be the world's most challenging big game, the wily whitetail deer. To begin with, I'd like to say that when I started hunting them in the 70s and on through the 80s, it could be said that it was the most challenging game animal on the world to hunt. And even today, it is, if you match wits with him in his own environment. Not so much so maybe if you set over a pile of corn or you got a managed piece of property with cross fences that he's got to go around. I'm not saying anything bad about that. I mean, a lot of them guys enjoy the challenge of drawing a 200-inch deer. But the challenge is more in drawing him than killing him. Back when I used woodsmanship skills to kill these mature deer and match wits one-on-one, it could be said then and was often said that the whitetail deer is the most challenging big game animal in the world to kill. And I often remember people saying back in the day, you could hire a guide and pay him enough money, he would guarantee you any trophy on game animal species in the world but a whitetail deer. None of them would ever guarantee you that, because it wasn't like it is now. We wanting managers and landowners wanting deciding where they're going to bed and where they're going to feed and how they're going to get back and forth between the two and use that to the advantage. They were bedding and feeding where they chose, just like they've done for econs, even back to when the Indians hunted them. And we use a means towards scouting, like to figure all that out. But it's different now, and I don't know if the whitetail deer can anymore being said it's the most challenging and difficult game animal in the world to kill in every hunting situation. It still is if you get out in the big woods and match wits with them one-on-one. Another thing I got from that little catalog right there by Fred Bear, I was trying to figure things out, and I noticed he said that in some of his little points in there on deer hunting, if you find a good run, then that's a good place to set up. And he said if you build a blind, there wasn't no tree stands much back then, but if you build a blind on both sides of that run, you've got to double your chances of success because you could hunt with more days of different wind directions. And then I remember him saying, if you find where two trails to come together, you've doubled your chances of success. And boy, that really hit home with me. And I started working on that. And I started getting out in the woods and finding where three come together and where four come together. And I got to noticing where they come together, they was forced to be together. So that's where I really started figuring out this thing about terrain features. Fred Bear he was just I never did meet him. I wrote him. He wrote me. We wrote back and forth, sent pictures back and forth, and talked on the phone a few times. And I was going to go up and see him there I think 72 or 3, and we had it all planned out. And I got to looking on the map and just the distance and the old automobile I had back then. I just didn't think it'd make the trip, and I didn't have no money. But I broke down. I don't know what I'd have done. So never did get to meet him, but I wished I had. This is an autographed arrow by his. I just think I was a member of his sportsman's club, charter member of the Fred Bear Sportsman's Club, and I got a lot of game awards and patches from that. But anyway, that was a big deal back then. He was the deal. When we first started hunting back in the late 60s, early 70s, started deer hunting as soon as they got to be a population around here big enough to hunt. Of course, we drilled squirrel hunting and rabbit and small game, coon. Had a lot of coon dogs back in the day. But when I first started deer hunting, we'd watch him on the American Sportsman TV show. It was narrated by Kurt Gowdy, and we just loved to watch that. And he was killing grizzly bear and elephant and everything, but he was usually sneaking up on them on the ground. And, of course, back then we thought that was the way to hunt. And I tell you, with a little recurve bow and sneaking around on the ground, you wasn't going to do much with a whitetail deer, and very seldom would we kill one. And then we finally decided that the ambush thing with the tree stands was the ground blinds first, then later when tree stands come out. So things started changing quite a bit then. That's a little bit of history. You know, if you study the history of anything, if you take it back to far enough, then it's fascinating. So I could talk a whole lot about when safety belts first come out, and tree stands and compound bows, and then arrows with interchangeable points. I remember when all that come out. It's pretty fascinating. And in my books, I talk about our heritage, and I go back to Issue, the Last American Wild Indian, and Maurice and Will Thompson, and bring it forward to us today. So I think that's a very interesting chapter in my book too. These fellows wanted me to speak on my archery tournaments. I've been fascinated with archery and the flight of an arrow all my life since a young man, and I used to shoot in local competition and state competition. And then when I got to be 60 years old, I started shooting on the national and world level. And I've been pretty successful at that. And I really enjoyed it. And I still enjoy it. And I still coach archery a lot. And I'm trying to get back into competition. It's just a time thing with me right now, but I sure hope to do that. Well, I won 8 world champions and 21 nationals, and I hold a lot of state and national and world records too. So I was pretty successful at it. I started a lot of stuff late in life. I guess I was a late bloomer. Wasn't smart enough, I guess, to start some of this stuff early, and I wished I had. I started logging at 62, started shooting competition at 60. And now I'm doing this here. I wished I'd been doing it 10 or 15 years ago, teaching people stuff because maybe they could learn more. It seems like every time I get asked to do a podcast, I think, well, I don't know what else I could say. You know, it's just pretty basic, but it just keeps coming. So I guess I've got 60 years worth of knowledge in my head. And even though, like I said, it's simple, simpler than most people believe, inside that simplicity of it, there are still so many rabbit holes you can go down. You know, if you get in podcasts and listen to people, and listen to people explain about hunting, read about them, read what they say. And a lot of it sounds confusing and sounds like they're contradicting themselves. If you can't take what is seemingly a complicated subject, like me, for instance, explaining about trophy bow hunting a while ago, about there's a time you can pattern them, a time you can't, and how to hunt that situation. If you can't take what is seemingly a complicated subject and explain it in a simple way where the average person can understand it, maybe you don't know. Maybe the person you're talking to does not really know the subject matter. Maybe he's an imposter. So the more you understand something, the simpler it becomes, not the more complicated it becomes, I think. So listen here, I killed, I think 11:55. I killed him within 5 minutes of dinner. I guess we get conditioned hunting early in the year to think that deer bed down 9 or 10 o'clock. And they do some when it gets hot, the does do that time of year. But the mature bucks, if I'm in a stand and I see a lone deer coming toward me, I get them getting my bow because I know it's probably going to be a mature buck. Hunt all day if the temperature is conducive for all day movement. That's the thing about it. That 3rd through the 7th, I'll take those dates of November more than the whole rest of November if the temperature is cold. If the temperature is warm, then those dates on that particular year, your chances go down probably tenfold of killing a big one. We're at the mercy of the weather, and that's the one thing we can't control. This is Mountain Mike. I named him Mike. Clay was videoing me. It was around Thanksgiving. There's an awful dead time there around the 9th or 10th to about the 19th. You still get them. Don't get me wrong. If you've got the time, can be there, be there. You can still get them. They can get between does, and you can be close enough to where they're between does, you can get them. They got back on their feet pretty good. They generally do it around the 19th through Thanksgiving. It was cold that morning. Clay was sitting with me. A funnel, a great ditch funnel, and I looked over there, and I looked at Clay, and he was just kind of freezing, hunkered down. And I looked over on the far ridge, the area he's supposed to be looking at, and there stood two bucks and a doe, and I got my binoculars out. And it was Mountain Mike, and that's the one we was after. We'd been talking about him for 2 or 3 years and decided it was big enough to hunt. And I said, Clay, there's a deer over there, and that's Mountain Mike. He said, where? And I said, right over there. He looked, and Mountain Mike started kind of away from us, said, I ain't go up the hill. And I said, he's coming right to us. Get the camera ready. And Clay said, well, Daddy, that deer is going the opposite way. And I said, you wait and see. Of course, I knew how the ditch run. He was going around the head of the ditch and come right to us. And I killed him. A great story because my son was with him. Learned a lot about deer hunting him. He was very nocturnal until that time he shouldn't have been. It was really cold. And we killed him about 10:30. So I done an evaluation of these big deer I've killed once they're off their pattern in November. And it was equal. I'd kill like 3 or 4 around daylight, 3 or 4 mid-morning, 3 or 4 around dinner, 3 or 4 mid-afternoon. The biggest one I ever killed was mid-afternoon. Then late evening. It's even. And if you leave and get out of your stand, either because you don't have the tenacity or you don't think they're moving, then you're really hurting your chances. You're just exponentially hurting your chances. And I explained that mathematically in my new book, how you're hurting your chances. Most people wouldn't have been in the stand then. It was cold and windy. It never got out of the teens, and it was windy, and I think around 10:30 I got him. That's old Rattlesnake. He was 7 years old when I killed him. He was better the year before. I got several of his sheds. This is his 3.5-year-old. This is his 4. And this is 6.5-year-old. The other side had a drop. That was his 6.5-year-old. He was a little better that year. He went down just a little bit. He taught me a lot of stuff. He taught me that even in the big woods where there's hunting pressure, I wasn't the only one hunting this property. He taught me even in the big woods where there's hunting pressure, every now and then one with that trait to move in daylight all through the fall outside the rut can get by. I got his picture several years. He was 7.5 when I killed him. He really wasn't what I wanted until he got to be about 6.5, and then I started hunting him. I never did think he'd get out of the 140s, but he finally developed a pretty good rack, mainly because of the number of times. But I got his picture in daylight all through, and I knew that if he ever made what I wanted to kill, then I'd be able to get him outside the rut on a pattern. And I did, and it was one of those rare ones that got by hunting pressure with that trait to be 7.5. Hardly ever with these bucks, if they don't turn nocturnal time to 3.5, hardly ever will they get by. But he did. He just had a little niche there and got lucky. And I ain't going to say it was his intelligence. They're all smart. Instead of their intelligence or maybe their ability to use the terrain and the wind, I think that their nomadic movement saves more of them than anything. There's just no pattern to them, especially in November when most of them are moving. I knew he was one I could kill early, and I got him. He's the earliest I ever killed one. The only one I ever killed before October 25th, and I got him October 1st. So occasionally you'll get to hunt a buck that is not nocturnal, even outside the rut. Most of them are nocturnal until the rut hits them, and that's about the 25th. Great story. One of the older deers I've ever killed. He was 7.5. Named him Rattlesnake. When me and Clay, we went to check trail pictures of him. Clay was allergic to poison oak, so he was standing back here on the road, and I went over to check a trail camera picture, and because there's a lot of poison oak there, and there was a rattlesnake land there, and I told Clay, I said, there's a pretty rattlesnake land here, and he said, Daddy, I'd like to see it, and I said, he just shed it, he sure is pretty. I said, I'll bring him out to you, and I got my foot on his head and got him caught and carried him out there. We looked at him, and then we got to look at them pictures and wanted to see them because we knew he was 3.5. We knew he might be in that area. I fooled around and kind of forgot about the snake, I guess, and loosened my grip, and he got around there and bit me. So anyway, we decided to name him Rattlesnake. I was going through the property here one time. I had an old Ford that both fenders was beat up because of the tight roads and headlights was pointing down. It was at night, and I had a hole in first gear, and it was my best truck. There's a big old snake in the road. I mean, a big old rattlesnake. And I got out and got him caught. I was trying to hold him and go through there, and I just got me one of them cell phones, and it was a flip phone. And Roger, a friend of mine, my cousin, actually a good friend of mine, he just passed this past year, but he called me, and I was trying to talk to him and hold my truck in gear and trying to not get mixed up on which hand was the snake, And I dropped the phone twice. He said, what are you doing? And I told him, I just got out here and got an old snake caught, and I'm trying to hold him and keep him off of me. And he said, Bobby, I'll let you go. We'll talk later. So, we got the old hog here. I killed him when I was, I think, a sophomore or junior in high school. They thought he'd come out of Catoosa, but there was no farmer in the head of the valley. He would run his cattle off and eat all of his feed, and he told me and a buddy about it. My daddy took us up there, and I had an old British Army gun, had the stock all the way out. My buddy shot through the leg, and he took off toward him, and I happened to get real lucky, and shot him in the head. But I've carried that thing around from house to house. I lived in an old farmhouse up here on the mountain, and the chimney caught on fire, and it started singeing him, and I got him off the wall, and finally got the fire put out. It done a little damage, but I've carried that old hog around since I was in high school. And still got him. My daddy mounted him. He's a pretty good hand at doing stuff. This old deer here I killed one cold November, public hunting in Illinois. Went up earlier and got on some good sign. Found a funnel and found where he was coming and going off of private ground. And that's one of them deer I killed in November 17th. So when they are locked down, you got to hunt. You still got to be there. And I killed him mid-evening. Most people wouldn't have been there then. Man, it was cold. Al Gore and Bush was locked in a election. And I wanted to see the results. It was locked in that election deal, and I come out at dinner and quickly checked and ate a quick bite and went right back. I didn't stay out. Another guy hunting with me stayed out until late that evening, but if I hadn't went back, or about 2 o'clock or something, I think I killed him. Shot him on a dead run. I knew I had him. I'd shot a lot of running game with my bow, rabbits and stuff. And I knew I had him. When I pulled in front of him, I knew it was right. Still shooting fingers in, or at least just trying with my fingers. Man, he looked up and seen me. He was coming hard. He looked up and seen me, and boy, he did start then just huge strides out through there. But I was able to catch up with him mentally and physically, and passing, and I knew I had him. So that was an interesting story. That deer scored up in the 180s. His points run from, I think the shortest main point is 12.5 to 15.25 inches. A lot of mass, big old tines, and he was a great deer. Stories about all of them. A big difference in humans and animals. We have the ability to contemplate our possibilities and act on them. And with the right application of correct knowledge and effort, then we can reach a high degree of skill in about anything we want to do, and that can bring us a lot of joy. And this bow hunting has brought me a lot of joy over the years. I really appreciate God creating such an intelligent adversary, and that me being able to, having the physical ability and mental to some degree to be able to hunt them. And it's brought me a lot of joy, and I'm trying to pass on as much of that as is possible now to new generations. A lot of jealousy you got to deal with when you're out there trying to do it for the right reason to help people, and for the wrong reason. It don't matter what reason. There's going to be always somebody that's going to try to rise up over you by putting you down. I write a lot about jealousy, but it don't matter. I've got where it don't bother me whatsoever. I've got so many people that understands what I'm teaching and has been successful at it, and it has brought them to a higher level in their accomplishments. I have really enjoyed that, and enjoy seeing people learn and seeing the pictures of the big deer they've killed from using my tactics. And I hope to continue to pass on what I know to other people.
When it comes to whitetail hunting, one of the most overlooked pieces of gear that gets pushed to the wayside is your glass. And that is why I love Hawk Optics. They have a variety of different options at an affordable cost, backed with a lifetime warranty that rivals all of the premium optic manufacturers. Whether you're looking for a pair of binoculars, a spotting scope to have in your truck at all times when you're cruising around and you see a deer in the backfield, pop this out. It's very compact, very surprisingly good glass for the price. And if you want to save 15% off, you can use the code WHTL at Hawk's website. You're going to support the show, save some money, and get some good glass. One piece of gear I am extremely excited to use in a tree stand this fall is the laser rangefinding binoculars by Hawk, all-in-one system. You don't have to fumble around between your binoculars for your rangefinder. One clean swoop, pull them up, get the range, and get ready for the shot you've been waiting for all fall. Use code WHTL at checkout to save 15% off Hawk Optics and be backed for life.
I wrote something the other day. I write all the time about jealousy. Well, it started out not being about jealousy, and it turned into jealousy. Some of my greatest enjoyments, I was sitting here writing when you guys got here. You got here a little earlier than I thought, and watching Dragnet. And in Mayberry I think I had it recorded for next. Here's something I wrote the other day. As I watched the hummingbird hover over a tulip, a thought came to mind. Back when I was mentally immature, I incorrectly believed that by killing something wild and beautiful and unattainable, I would somehow possess these characteristics that I found so fascinating. As I matured, I came to understand that I can only remove from my existence these traits by destroying their host. I liken this to a jealous individual who irrationally believes that by destroying a successful person's reputation, he can somehow acquire their ability and notoriety, when in reality, by doing so, he even further diminishes these traits from his own existence. So that's just something I sat down here and jotted down a couple of days ago. But I enjoy writing. I enjoy putting my thoughts into words, and I guess that's why I've got books now, and they've been so successful.
I would say, given your writing, what are some of the projects you've done and the impact that, you feel that they've made?
Well, I don't think there's a lot of good practical information out there on hunting big deer in the real world anymore. Used to, hunting was all the same. You was either hunting farmland where several other people was hunting the same deer, and you had the same situation as you have here in Tennessee in the big woods or in wildlife managed areas, but it has changed a lot now. So people have lost the art of woodsmanship skills. Nowadays, they just want to sit in a blind and kill deer over the food plot instead of getting out in the woods. And I try to teach that in my books. It's been amazing to me. I tell that story in my book. Most people never thought I'd even read a book, much less write one. I seen Passionate Quest, which is this one here. I seen it go here about a month ago online for $5,700. That is just amazing to me. It looks like Final Quest, only it's just got a different name, Passionate Quest. I was stunned by that. And then this bow hunting trophy whitetail, I've seen them sell for $1,000. I run out of them. I sold all of mine. I didn't realize I'd done it. And I bought this one the other day for $440 something, but I seen them go for $1,000. And this one was in Crossville, right up here, the next town. And I got to thinking, I didn't know the guy was from Tennessee. And I got thinking, when he addressed that envelope, I bet he thought, well, that name's familiar, you know. But anyway, I bought my book back. I sold for 40 something, for 400 and something. And then I had a guy the other day call, and he's going to pay $3,500 for one of my Passionate Quest. I've still got a few. He's going to pay $1,000 for this limited edition Final Quest that I done, and then he's going to pay whatever I want for the bow hunting trophy whitetail. I just can't fathom that. I was so ignorant in school. It took me 8 classes of English to go to high school. You know, I run into one of these local guys. He's in the next county over, but he'd known me and followed me and was in school with me. I run into him the other day, and he'd been following. He's a hunter, and he'd been seeing what they was going for. And he thought for a minute, he said, did you ever learn the ABCs? Because he knew I struggled with that. And I said, well, I know them all, or I couldn't write, but I just don't know them in a line. And the way I looked at it in school, I don't know why you'd want to write them down in a line anyway. They don't spell nothing. And if they did, the word would be so big with all of them vowels and consonants and stuff, you couldn't pronounce it. So, no, I never did learn my ABCs or my multiplication tables, but that would have been handy. But ABCs, as long as you know all them letters, you can make words out of them. And I use that internet. I talk, you know, when it records it. So there's a thing. If it wasn't for that, I couldn't have wrote nothing. No, I can hardly spell my last name still. But I can kind of put words. I can put my thoughts into words. So that's what matters, I guess. Because nowadays you got that technology to do the rest of it. But that's been amazing. It's just been from knowing where I come from to where I am. So if I can write books, anybody can. I'm pretty stubborn, you know, determination and grit. I was thinking the other day, with the possibility exception of courage, grit is probably the only human trait you cannot imitate or fake. You either got it or you ain't. And also you got to have confidence. You got to have confidence in your ability. I wrote something for my other book that says, other than the realization that we are accountable beings, the discovery of our own potential is the single most important event in our lives. It will allow a person to boldly move forward in whatever he's doing without wavering, without stumbling, without flinching. And I believe that's the truth. I got encouraged when I wrote an article for a magazine, and somebody said that they liked that, and I got the confidence I needed. And then I've got a lot of grit about me, and I think those two traits is why I have accomplished whatever I've accomplished in my life. Final Quest, you know, I'm about through hunting these old deer like I did. It's changed so much now. I'm still going to do a little bit of it this year in some public ground, but I titled it Final Quest because I thought it might be my last one, and plus I'm about on my Final Quest too. But I tell you, these books have sold too. They've sold so quick, and I've got other things to say, so I'm looking at maybe doing another one. They're going to be sold out here in a month or two. We printed 5,000 back in September, and I think there's about 1,500 left or something. And it's got bow hunting trophy whitetail and Passionate Quest in it. Final Quest has got all of my writings about hunting him. But, I mean, it's the complete book, but I don't want to reprint them. Several people bought the limited edition version of that for a collector's item, and they sold out within 2 weeks. I think there was $365. But a lot of people bought these others to collect them too, because they've seen what my other books are going for, and they really like the book. I've had people buy boxes of them. And they asked me, are you going to reprint them? And I said, well, if I do, it'll devalue your book. So I don't want to devalue the book. So people that's wanting to collect all of my books, I might do another one. I've got Passionate Quest, Final Quest, and I may call this an Ultimate Quest, because there's things I want to happy about in that book, things I thought I could have done better, and things I thought I could add. For years, like that little quote I read a while ago, for years I've collected quotes I've wrote. I've got a whole book of them. I mean, it would make a book. And I think I'd like to have a chapter with my philosophies and ideas and thoughts about life in one of them. Some of them's humorous, some of them serious. And then I think I need another chapter on my philosophy of hunting and how things have changed so much. And then I'd like to go through it and maybe, like I did Passionate Quest, that's how I ended up with Final Quest, add some stuff on every page. Probably I can add stuff now that, not that I've learned more, but that I've thought about it more. So, and I don't want to devalue people's books that bought them for collectors. I printed 5,000, and if I do a reprint, which I need to do something because I've sold out and people still want them, or I'm close to selling out. So if I do a reprint, then that's going to devalue their book. So I may do another volume and call it Ultimate Quest. People think they're a little high, but people that value something don't. For instance, let's just say Final Quest, instead of pricing it at $80, I priced it at $20. Well, you'd have a $20 book in your house. You know, that would have devalued everybody's book. It'd devalue your book. When you pay $80 for it, you got something you cherish more because you've got a little more sweat in it. And this is $365. That people value that. Now, if it had been $35, they wouldn't value it like that. They've got something in their home that's of value. And you can't put a price on the knowledge in these books. It took me 60 years to get this knowledge. You can't put a price on that. So anyway, I like to make stuff of value, whether it's a craft or I write a few songs, whatever. I like to make something. I like to try to do it that is something everybody can't do, and it is of value to people. And that way, when they acquire it, they have something of value. And these books selling for thousands of dollars now. That first one in Bow Hunting Trophy Whitetail and Passionate Quest. When people get them, they got something of value. I have no doubt that Passionate Quest, when I'm gone, will be worth $10,000. That was just because of the limited number, and it was the first book that really explained things like it does, I think. And it got a lot of quotes in it, a lot of philosophies. It got stories about big deer that everybody just really enjoys. And there's a lot of things in it besides just hunting knowledge, but I think the hunting knowledge is paramount. Now, I want to say that I didn't come up with all that because I'm intelligent. There's a lot of people a lot smarter than me. It's really, I come up with all that because I'm kind of lacking. But I was tenacious. I tried everything under the sun, and nothing I thought would worked. And then I went over here and tried what was left, and hey, it worked. So I didn't come up with all that because I'm smart. I come up with all that because I'm kind of done. I tried everything else wrong first, and I thought, well, there ain't but one thing left to try. So here you go. So that's how I come up with it. And then, like I said, success is doing common things uncommonly well. So I took what I figured out worked, and I really done it uncommonly well. I pushed it into a high level, into a art. Mastery of skills takes a lifetime. These people that's 20, 30 years old out there on the internet trying to tell people how to hunt and bash old hunters like me, they hadn't even got to the level yet where they can ask good, intelligent questions. They hadn't even got to that level yet. Things I don't understand about whitetail deer that they won't even know to even ask. So anyway, I've always enjoyed wildlife photography. I've got a lot of good pictures of deer and other things. And anymore, I've enjoyed writing some of my philosophies or quotes or whatever you want to call them, poems. Here lately, I've been writing a lot of songs. One of my favorites, Where Did All the Woodsmen Go? But here's a quote I wrote, and I've done this photograph here of this deer. Then I wrote, the sharp tongue of a cool breeze carried a thought to me as I waited for you to stray. Tell me a ghostly story, my gypsy friend. Where have you been today? Whose eyes did you fill with tears? Whose spine did you fill with fear? Whose heart did you care to break? Whose spirit did you jolt awake? Whose soul did you dare to acquire? Whose woods did you set on fire? Whose mind did you lead astray in the deadly game of do and dare that you must play? The sharp tongue of a cool breeze carried a thought to me as I waited for you to stray. I write a lot of these. All of these are in my new book. So I put one of my best pictures right here, and I think of deer. I went in there to set up one of them rubs, and I was going to photograph this deer. He was already there, but I had my camera ready, and I got a good picture of him running away, and I think that would have been better. There's all kinds of pictures of deer rubbing trees, but I like it. And I think this is something we all ought to think about. This quote here, I'm really proud of it. Could this magnificent, wild, and free creature finally be mine? I looked him over and tears filled my eyes as I realized all of my time, efforts, and dreams are in vain. I stooped down knowing it can only be after my feathered hunger has purged from existence the thing that I desire most, that I am allowed to approach him. As I reached out and touched him, his soul tells mine. Now you have set me free, and it is you who forever belongs to me. So I think that's the more you mature, the more you think along those lines, I think. It's a little bit like that quote I read earlier. This is one of my best pictures. That's Mama's old mailbox. I don't know which one of us shot a hole in it back in the day, but got some old gourds on it, that old sparrow nest and cardinals. And pretty old home place there. And I wrote under it, Mother Nature autographs her work with excellence. By the simple beauty of a cardinal's flight, the brilliant essence of nature is manifest. What you see in nature defines who you are, and who you are forever. I literally ate my weight in cheese and crackers, like I have done a lot of things, but getting that picture. I was shooting slides, and I bet I went through boxes and boxes of them for weeks until I got the shot I had dreamed up in my mind. And nearly threw it away because I seen it was a little blurry, but I'm glad I didn't now. It was what I wanted. So anyway, it turned out good. But, there's a few of us old timers left that hunted deer the hard way back before the technology, and you had to match your wits against them. And I think it's a shame that woodsmanship has been lost, and myself and my friends, Gene and Barry Winslow, is doing what we can to pass woodsmanship on to the younger generation. I don't know if it'll take or not. They're so involved in this cell phone and looking everything up and instant gratification. And I believe that's why we have these school shootings, we have people depressed, we have people miserable because they've got no challenges no more. They get that instant gratification, and they hadn't really took the time to learn a skill that really takes a lifetime to learn, and then not succeeding every time because you don't have the instant gratification. Learning how difficult life can be, learning how difficult hunting one of these big bucks in his own terms can be, and then learning from that mistake and learning from the next one and learning his nature and learning about him and then finally succeeding. But when you succeed the way I have, you cherish these trophies. There's none of us true woodsmen, you're going to go in their house and see a cap and a pair of sunglasses on these deer. We respect them. We cherish them because they were hard gained. You give a kid an automobile and see what happens to it. And then you let him earn it, making a little money at a time and working hard night and day, sacrificing time with his friends to earn something, and see if he don't cherish it a little more. These animals are to be respected and cherished, and they're not to be disrespected by putting caps and sunglasses on them and hanging signs from them. No, you can't disrespect wildlife more than giving it human traits, because human beings are generally jealous, and a lot of bad traits involved where you won't find that in nature. My goal is to pass woodsmanship on. It ain't to make money. If I make some on the side, that's fine. It don't take much for me to get around and get by. After this many years of learning and perfecting a trait, I feel like at this point in my life, if it only benefited me and I couldn't pass on the joy of what I've learned to others, then my life would be a waste, and I certainly don't want to feel like that. Appreciate y'all inviting me to do this and coming in here and bringing a camera with you and all that. We'll watch some more Dragnet if you want to. Y'all have a good day. Thank you so much.
there you guys have it. I hope you guys enjoyed this version. If you guys like it, maybe we'll do this more in the future on depending on who the guest is. And lastly, I want to say thank you to Moultrie, Onyx, Hawk Optics, and Painted Arrow for supporting the show. And thank you for you guys for making it this far. We'll see you next week.